So the meeting is live streamed, it's safe, so I click on the OK.
Yes.
Yes, Master.
So now we have only 4 minutes left. So I will resume what we have learned. Last time we have learned how the mind, when it moves, how it evolves by getting more and more involved in the process of differentiation. So, and clinging to differentiation. First, we have learned the mind moves. When the mind moves, we have learned this the basic movement is, so to say, very hardly noticeable by us because everything happens in the mind. This is a school of mind only. The outer objects, so to say, they are just an illusion. So when the mind moves, we have learned then in alaya we have the three aspects which are then transformed to all the minds which evolve. The mind which evolve, they are called pravriti vijnana. Pravriti means evolving. So they evolve from alaya. Alaya is a basic mind, and this basic mind is called alaya vijnana. It is called the chitta, and this mind is a resultant mind. Vipaka. Vipaka is from the Sanskrit to pach. It means in this mind, the bijas, the seeds of consciousness, they, so to say, they evolve. And this is our world. Our world is evolvement of the seeds of consciousness. And these seeds of consciousness, they are stored in the store consciousness or alaya, or the same consciousness we have learned is called in the Theravada tradition the bhavanga, or the root of existence. So how the objects in the root of existence, according to the alaya tradition, we don't know. So they appear spontaneously, and when they appear spontaneously, there is not yet in the mind itself the division between past, future, and the present is not clear. All is just mind. So not yet any definite differentiation. That's why this mind is so subtle. It is so subtle that it is practically, unless we have attained the very high stage of bodhisattva realization, even arahat, so to say, according to this tradition, the Xuanzang tradition is different. Even the arahat does not see how this mind moves in the very subtle ways, which is practically not noticeable. When we attain the achala bhumi, the eighth bhumi of the bodhisattva, we become master of this mind. Because in the seventh stage, we don't, so to say, have any signs of objects which appear. So then the mind can become unmovable. Now we still have signs of objects which appear, so we don't see that as soon as the mind arises, in that very moment, it is the manifestation of avidya. Avidya means literally non-science. This is very important to understand. As soon as the mind moves, in that very kshana, in that very moment, the avidya, the non-science or ignorance or non-science, many different translation for that. At that very moment, the avidya arises. And avidya is the non-body, the pu-jue, the non-body. And we have learned the non-body arises only in relation to body. This is dependent origination. You cannot have body without non-body. This is very important for understanding the bodhisattva path. We can have only body in relation to non-body. That's why we can stay in samsara. This is the aim, without suffering. Because we can, so to say, understand the moving mind of the others, but eventually when we have advanced in our practice, and if we practice the Tunjie, the sudden enlightenment, we already are based on this principle. As you know, in Chinese Buddhism, we have the sudden enlightenment approach, Tunjie, and we have the gradual enlightenment approach, Xianjue. The sudden enlightenment approach is that precisely what is here explained, that as soon as the mind moves, it is already in it already the non-science or avidya or ignorance is existent, but it exists as everything else only in relation. Nothing exists except suchness, which is the highest reality, which as opposed to Madhyamika, in this tradition exists by itself. This is a difference from Madhyamika. In Madhyamika, nothing can exist by itself. In this tradition, as we have seen in the beginning, the Buddha is omnipresent because it is the true nature of all the phenomena. And even when the mind is moving, it cannot leave the true nature of the phenomena. And the true nature of the phenomena is emptiness. In non-dualistic sense, it is suchness. So even when the mind moves, it cannot leave suchness. It is impossible to leave suchness because Buddha is omnipresent. Buddha is a wisdom which is omnipresent, and you cannot leave suchness. So that means that in this tradition, dependent origination is also illusory. It does not have any real existence, as in the Xuanzang tradition, as in Chengwei Shalun tradition. Ignorance, the dependent origination, you have to admit that it exists. Otherwise, you come, so they believe, you come to the nihilistic view. Here, the dependent origination cannot exist by itself because the six senses cannot exist by themselves, because the six objects cannot exist by themselves, because the six consciousnesses cannot exist by themselves. Nothing exists by themselves, by itself. Since nothing exists by itself, therefore Nothing is separated from the Buddha's wisdom, from the suchness. Buddha's wisdom is a suchness wisdom, which actually is pure wisdom. And this pure wisdom is always connected with the light of gnosis, with the light of cognition. So the mind is, pure mind is self-illuminous. Now, when we do not think, our mind, if we keep in the state of non-thinking, then our mind also becomes non-luminous. As long as we don't think, the mind illumines itself, because we don't turn to any object. When you can stay in the state of not paying attention to any object in particular, your mind also becomes luminous. But that illuminous mind is bhavanga, or the alaya in our case, because we cannot stay a long time without paying attention to objects. It is impossible for why we are not Buddhas. When we are Buddhas, we always stay in the self-illuminous wisdom without interruption. So we don't need any attention to objects, as we have explained before. We just reflect by all four types of our consciousnesses, as we have explained before. We just reflect the objects as a mirror. And this is because our alaya consciousness has become the universal mirror. The manas consciousness, the organ of consciousness, has become, as we have explained, the suchness, the mirror of sameness, which also belongs to suchness. The manovigyana, the mental consciousness, becomes a beautiful seeing, which also belongs to suchness. And the five consciousnesses become the mirror of accomplishing whatever one does, which is also part of suchness. It has been explained in the beginning, worshipping of Buddha is worshipping all these qualities. All these qualities of mirror consciousness. So in case of Buddha, as opposed to us, we need attention to understand something. And then when we have attention, we differentiate. When we differentiate, then if we are not well trained in meditation, we get stuck in our differentiation, which are based on concepts, not on reality. This is the Chittamatartha. Same also in Scienza. And then, because we cling to these concepts, then we do new karma and a new bondage to the karma. Either good karma, the positive side, which is the most important part of training, to train in the positive mental factors. The positive mental factors are the key for this. In this tradition, we have 11 positive factors, like no negligence, like no ignorance, no greed, no hate, the strenuous effort, and apramada, the non-negligence, and the non-violence, ahimsa. And so these positive factors, they make a positive existence. A positive existence is, in this Chittamatrata tradition, is the uh, kind of uh, is pure Paratantra. Paratantra means relativity. We are in relativity because our mind has continuity. It arises from continuity and it lives in relativity. We cultivate Dharma, we cultivate positive relativity. We cultivate Anashrava Dharmas. Anashrava Dharmas are the uh, phenomena which are without the inflow of impurities into the mind from outside or to the surrounding from inside. They are called anashrava dharma or defiled dharmas. These defiled dharmas, when they become predominant, so we live in more and more suffering, more and more bondage. When the positive dharmas, when these 11 positive mental factors are cultivated and become our nature, then we attain more and more ease in existence. But it is still, even this ease in existence, from the point of view of the highest reality, it is still not liberation as long as our mind moves according to this tradition. It is already endowed with non-science. So the very moment it moves, it's already ignorance. Because, as we have seen, the 18 dhatus, the 18 elements of our experience cannot be separated. They appear together. They appear together when the mind moves. When the mind does not move, so we don't pay particular attention to an object, we don't pay particular attention to the subject, we don't pay particular attention to the mind distinguishing the subject and object. But as soon as it moves, it's already, in this tradition, it's already manifestation of the ignorance. So ignorance is moment by moment. This is the Tunche, the sudden enlightenment approach. As soon as the mind moves, it's already ignorance. So when you are aware of it, then you are, so to say, gathering the wisdom of suchness. So eventually you can stay in the state without thinking for a long time. And that state without thinking is always a luminous state, a luminous mind. The bhavanga or alaya, when it does not move, it is a luminous mind. This is very important to understand. Even though it is product of ignorance, when it does not move, it is still a luminous mind. But this luminosity is, so to say, is lost when it evolves, when it becomes pravriti vijnanas, when it identifies with the six kinds of consciousnesses. Mano-Vijnana, the mental consciousness, and five sense consciousnesses, when it identifies with them, so it loses its nature. So the true nature of the mind, and our mind is alaya mind because we dwell in the world. The true nature of the mind is luminous, but this luminosity is lost as we get caught more and more in the defilements. This is what we learned last time. First, there is a very subtle defilement which we cannot notice because it happens in the time, and it is when it happens not in time, and it just happens spontaneously. So it is so subtle that we can hardly notice it. We notice it when we turn to the object. Then there is a process of differentiation, and on this process of differentiation is our continuity. We are the continuity of the mind. But this continuity of the mind, just as the dependent origination in this tradition, is based on the moving mind, which is moved by ignorance. It is not real in itself. Whatever is not real in itself, when it moves, is moved by ignorance. This is very important to understand. So when we have learned at first, we have the three aspects of the alaya. We have the self-witnessing mind, which means the karma consciousness. Due to karma consciousness, the mind is moving. When the mind moves, there is a perceiver, which is the avarjana chitta, the consciousness which turns, which perceives. And then this avarjana chitta is accompanied by kyati chitta. Kyati chitta means the mind which manifests, where when there is perceiver, there is a perceived. These three actually happen simultaneously. Whenever the mind moves, it moves because of the karma consciousness. When it moves, it evolves. And that is the avarjana chitta, the evolving consciousness. When it evolves, automatically there will be an object, and that is kyati consciousness, revealing consciousness. When there is a revealing consciousness and we don't see that all this is happening in the mind, then we come to the wisdom of differentiation. This is pleasant, this is unpleasant. This automatically, when it happens, then we have already like something like object outside. When we have object outside, we have continuity of the mind, which we consider to be real. And from this continuity of the mind arises our individual consciousness, because we all have different experiences, we have different seats in the mind, so we have different continuity of the mind. So we react all in a different way, and we all dream in a different way. None of us dreams always in the same way. It does not exist. Similarly, we also don't react in the same way because we have based on different differentiation, we have different continuity of the mind. And this continuity of the mind, that is bhavanga, that is the cause of existence. And that is alaya, that is the mind which dwells in the world, literally, or sticks into the world. Let me have some tea. So we stick to the world. That's why our mind has continuity. So what we cling to is not the reality, but it is the reality which the seeds in our consciousness, which the continuity consciousness represent to us. So we see the same objects, but we react very differently. We see the same persons, but we react very differently because we are governed by this uh, aspect of continuity. This is the second of the gross aspect. Remember, there are three subtle aspects of the mind which only highly realized bodhisattva sees. Then there is this aspect of differentiation. We have to be also very realized to see it immediately. And then based on that, we have the aspect of continuity. And the aspect of continuity, that are we in the world. That is our individual consciousness, manas. Then, when we have manas, we will see that here in this scripture, the explanation of the manas is also different from the Xuanzang tradition. But nevertheless, it is the same meaning. When there is manas, then we have the organ of thinking, and we just keep on thinking, and we think in a different way because we have the different seeds in the mind, right? So because we have a different seeds in the mind, we react differently. We cling to different objects. We cling to, somebody clings to that person, the other cling to another person, somebody cling to these things, another one clings to completely other things. But because we cling, then we create concepts, and the concepts, same like in Xuanzang, the concepts, they create the stability in the reality which has no stability. The reality is just continuity of the mind which moves moment by moment. But because we don't see it, as Aryadeva, the great disciple of Nagarjuna, says, because we don't see that we are just a continuity of mind which has no standing anywhere. So we don't understand ourselves. We don't understand Atman. We don't understand what we are. Because we don't understand what we are, we have always doubt. As long as we have no realization, we have always doubt. When we have realization, then we have learned before, then as long as we believe that it is realization which belongs to ourselves, then it is a seeming realization. When we have a bodhisattva realization, then there is no object of realization, and there is not a realized person also, because everything is relative, and whatever is relative in this tradition, it is not real. The relative cannot be real. This is a difference between the Xuanzang tradition, which claims that the relative must be real, so that we don't sink into nihilism, which is a great error in all Buddhist teachings. But here we cannot sink into nihilism because the suchness is the root of all the phenomena. All the phenomena change, but only seemingly change, not really change. This is what is to be realized. So when we are grasping, we are grasping to the concepts, and based on the concepts, this is uh, what I like, this is what I don't like, this is my wife, this is my son, and so on. It does not mean that these concepts are wrong. They are real, but only in the relative reality, not in the highest reality. And all Buddhist schools teach that unless we understand clearly the difference between the relative reality, which is hiding the true reality, then we cannot get the genuine realization. So, in this tradition, all the differences, they are illusionary differences. And they start with the movement of the mind. And as soon as there is movement of the mind, in that very kshana, in that very moment, the uh, ignorance is manifested. So when the ignorance is manifested, we don't see the whole. We don't see that the eye, the the color and the visual consciousness, they were never separated. They always the same, one whole. And this whole is called suchness. So when we then cling to the objects in terms of things and in terms of persons, then automatically we will create a new karma and a new bondage. This is we have these 6 aspects of the gross consciousness, which evolves from the bijas, from the seeds in the alaya consciousness. So we have the approach of the sudden enlightenment, Dong where we meditate just every moment of movement of the mind is the moment of ignorance, or we have the progressive enlightenment where we step by step purify the mind by not allowing, as we have learned, the gross manifestations of the self. That's why the Vasubandhu in Xuanzang's explanation of the 30, 30 verses of mere consciousness, the first verse say, I have to tell myself in Sanskrit, Atma Dharma Upachara, Pacharo Vividhayo Pravartate, Vijnana Parinamo Asau, Parinama Sachatrida. This is what we have to always repeat, always try to understand. The first verse, commented very well by Xianzang, the greatest part in a way, maybe 1/5 of the whole book, explaining the 30 verses of mere consciousness of Vasubandhu. It says that when we have habit of taking the self in things, in phenomena, in dharmas, and in persons as something real that is not there, but we have to add it to it to understand. Then our consciousness evolves. And there are 3 evolving stages of consciousness. We are coming to it right now, today. The first is a chitta, that is the so to say, a synonym for alaya vijnana because it collects our karma and represents our karma in our experience. Then the manas, which is the, so to say, the organ of thinking, when according to Xuanzang, when the manas sees the Zhuan Shi, the perceiving aspect of the alaya as a self, then arises a manas. Here we will find we have a different interpretation. We have 5 aspects of the manas, starting with the moving consciousness. So this joins the sudden enlightenment approach and the continuity approach, or the gradual enlightenment approach. So in this text also, these 2 approaches, they are joined. We have the sudden approach, all defiled dharmas, no matter how great the defilement, they are just one moment of ignorance, not more than that. Because we are not aware, then we get more and more involved. When we have become more and more aware, then we start to understand that this continuity of consciousness is not real. It is there, but it is not real. It is not something we can grasp. But for that, we need a lot of experience. So this experience is gradual. When we meditate step by step and purify the mind by this 11 cultivation of these 11 factors of the pure consciousness, not defiled consciousness, which purify our experience, or we just immediately, that is in a way Zen tradition, Dzogchen tradition, immediately when the mind moves, we are aware that this is not the natural state. The natural state of the mind is that it does not identify with movement, or does not identify with not movement. Wu Suo Ju Shen Qi Shi, as the Daimon Sutra teaches, the mind arises without finding dwelling anywhere. This is a practice. This is a practice for attaining the natural state of the mind. The natural state of the mind in this tradition is nirvana. Nobody can grasp it, therefore it is real. When we grasp, it is unreal. And this process of the unreal starts as soon as our mind moves. That very moment is the moment of ignorance. That very moment is a moment of pucce, of non-body. When we know this, then it is also, the non-body is related to body, and the body is related to the process of becoming enlightened, which is called shejie, coming back to the beginning. In the beginning, everything was perfect. But because we identify with the karmic mind, this perfection disappeared from our awareness. as Hui Neng says, Pen Lai Wu Yi Wu, He Chu Re Chen Ai. In the beginning, originally there was nothing to grasp. So how could there ever be any dust? Because there is no place where the dust can land, where the dust can stay. So originally, everything is nirvana. Therefore, the cultivation of mind is the cultivation of the those factors of consciousness which lead to the purity of consciousness. And it is also understanding that as soon as the mind moves, it is already engrossed in nescience, in avidya, in ignorance. Now let us come back to the text. This explanation is very important. We should never lose the sight of it. Go again and again to the text. Then the Ashwagosha says, Tanzhe Wu Ming Meng Sheng Yiqie Zhang Fa. We should know that ignorance, Wu Ming, the avidya, the non-science, can give rise to all the defiled phenomena, all the defiled dharmas. Why? 以一切染法皆是不觉想故. Because all the defiled dharmas, they are all without exception, are the manifestation, the nimitta, or the form, or the sign, they are reveal, or they are the sign of non-science, of pujye. So that part we have explained. As soon as our mind moves, immediately at that very moment, there is ignorance. And this ignorance gives rise to all the defiled dharmas. And all the defiled dharmas, they are the manifestation, they are the sign, they are the form of our not having body, our not enlightenment. So this is very important. As soon as the mind moves, it is a manifestation of our non-enlightenment. And the practice here is to be aware of it. And at the same time, to cultivate the positive mental factors which purify the mind so that this samadhi of one moment becomes a natural state for us. Now the text continues. Furthermore, 觉与不觉有二种相。The body, the enlightenment, and no body, they have two different expressions, manifestation, forms, nimittas. Now, following the commentaries, this is not clear from the text itself. We have to follow the commentaries, which says, like Hanshan, I'm using Hanshan's commentary, and like Fazang also, they say that actually when we leave the body, because as we have learned, it comes as a continuity of the previous one, so it is a continuation. When we leave the body, then we have no body, puche. And this no body has two forms, chungxiang, two, best translation would be two forms. What are the forms of non-body? What are the two kinds of manifestations of the non-body? How do we know that we are not enlightened? Very important. How do we know that we are not enlightened? The text explains. What are these two forms? We know that we are not enlightened because our mind gives rise to two different ways of thinking, two different objects, two different manifestations of mind, either in terms of sameness, Dongxiang, or in the form of differentiation. Because we don't understand the whole is not divisible, the organ, the object, and the mind, these three dhatus or spheres of perception. We cannot have perception without these three spheres of perception. In Sanskrit or Pali also, the dhatu means tie in Chinese. It means the opposite of self. When you understand the tie, the dhatu, the element, you understand non-self. We are deluded about the non-self because we don't understand the elements. And as soon as the idea that there is something real appears, so there is the real object, the real consciousness which perceives the object, and the real organ. These three, when they come together, there is a touch, faso. When there is touch, there is Vedana. Vedana means the feeling or perception and sensation. When there is touch, there is perception and sensation. And when there is perception and sensation, the organ, the eye, the color, and the visual consciousness come together, and they cannot be separated. This non-separation, this separation is due to our ignorance. So Buddha has no ignorance. We automatically separate because our investigation is based on attention. According to this tradition, also Madhyamika, Mahayana tradition, the Buddha does not need attention. The Buddha does not need applied thought, vitarka. He does not need sustained thought, vichara, to understand things. He just reflects them as they are, because his mind is just like mirror. It is like mirror, but of course it is not mirror. This is a great, because the mirror does not live and mind is what brings life. So we are separated from the whole. So this is manifestation of the non-body. And because we have non-body, then we see things in terms of sameness and in the terms of difference. So when we do that, immediately we should know, aha, we are not enlightened, which is not easy task to do. So in fact, this seeing things in terms of sameness and differentiation, it means that we are just already involved in ignorance. Because the true state of things is neither same nor different. This is, even in Theravada, we have the same idea. The dependent origination is the law that things can neither be same nor different. They are the process of dependent origination. And this dependent origination, same in Madhyamika, same in this tradition, is not real. Because just as Nagarjuna teaches, the things cannot arise from inside of themselves, as the Samkhya is teaching. They cannot arise from the other causes and conditions, as in Theravada. They cannot arise from both, from itself and from other causes and conditions, and they cannot arise without causes also. So the origination and the samsara is origination and cessation, continuous process of origination and cessation. It's not real. Since the samsara is not real, samsara is in relation to nirvana. So nirvana also cannot be absolutely existent by itself. But the mind is nirvana. And in this tradition, this mind, which is nirvana, is real. But nirvana, as opposed to samsara, is not real. But the mind is real. This is chittamatrata. This is difference with madhyamika. The mind also cannot be real. There is no entity which can be real in madhyamika. But in this tradition, the mind is real, but not the mind as we see it, but the essence of the mind, which is enlightenment. So there cannot be either separation in terms of sameness, there cannot be the separation in the terms of differentiation. When the process of differentiation of arising and cessation and the process of non-arising and non-cessation, we have learned, when they meet together, combine together, then it becomes alaya, alaya consciousness. And alaya consciousness, its essence does not move. Its essence is suchness, as Lankavatara Sutra teaches. This text is very deeply related to Lankavatara. And maybe if it belongs to Ashwagosha probably lived before the Lankavatara was composed. Nevertheless, he teaches exactly the same ideas. In essence, the alaya is suchness, but in its manifestations, it is samsara. In essence, it is suchness. In manifestations, it is samsara. And because we don't see that the manifestations, this was also explained in the beginning. That's why we have to read this text so carefully. Beginning is never separated from the end. We have the Dharma, which is one mind, which is suchness, hidden. This suchness is the same in us beings, where it is hidden by impurities. And also in the Buddhas and the sentient beings are one whole. They cannot be separated. Uh, so when we understand that the what is gives meaning, the objects, when they are objects, they should be understood not in terms of sameness, not in terms of differentiation, but the even so, when there is object, pratyaya, yuan, then the mind is changing, mind moves, but the essence of the mind never moves. It always remains the same in us, non-enlightened beings, or even when we become enlightened, we are only partially enlightened. We have learned. Even when we become arahats in this tradition, like in Lotus Sutra, we are only partially enlightened. The fully enlightened is only Buddha. And in this tradition, same like Xuanzang explained, only Buddha understand the uh, depths of the mind only, Chittamatrata, the depths of Vaishya. Only the Buddha has fully realized Vaishya, says Vasubandhu also in this tradition. So the Buddha becomes the uh, ultimate body. This is a Buddha, which is all, as explained in the beginning, all present, all active in saving the beings, but we don't see it because of our ignorance. Now, because of how is our ignorance manifested? Because of it is manifested by our clinging to the differentiation between the same and different. So when we think in text explains, 动向指, as far as the mind in terms which develops in terms of seeing things as same, in terms of sameness, it is like all kinds of say pottery, wachi, all kinds of pottery, they are all of the same nature, the same nature, the nature of clay. They are made of these subtle particles of the clay, to translate literally. But clay is okay. So, similarly, the anashrava means the pure dharmas, that is the pure paratantra, the pure side of dependent origination. We have to understand we have three realities in this tradition also, even though they are not mentioned directly in the text. We have the Paratantra reality, which is what we experience. we only experience in terms of relativity. The object is relative to the organ, is relative to the uh, consciousness, and so on. We only experience in terms of relativity. And this relativity can be pure. When it is pure, it is without inflow and outflow of impurities. That's why it is called anashrava, ashrava, or asava in Pali. It's the uh, inflow and outflow of impurities from the mind and into the mind. Very important. So we have the asava of clinging to sensuality. We have the asava of clinging to existence. We have the asava of clinging to our views. And we are always, when the mind is defiled, it is always defiled in these terms. They are basically the clinging to the self in things and in persons. So the asava, anasava or anashrava is the pure reality. The pure, our reality is dependent reality. We don't know anything except the relate in terms of relations. And the non-science. So the contrast between the pure paratantra, the pure relative reality, and the impure relative reality is described here as Wu Lo and Wu Ming. When is Wu Lo, our experiences in terms of pure mind? When is Wu Ming? When is nescience, our experiences in terms of defiled mind? The pure mind leads to the realization of the suchness. The defiled mind leads to more bondage. But this differentiation actually in terms of pure and impure relativity, this is experienced by us in terms of the illusionary karmic consciousness, which is not never separated from the suchness itself, from the true nature of consciousness. So we experience in terms of the contrast, tuitai. We experience in terms of the contrast. When we experience in terms of the contrast, we already don't see that this separation in terms of the contrast, in terms of relation, is due to our illusionary karmic consciousness, which arises as soon as the mind starts to move. And it can never leave this suchness consciousness because the mind can never leave its true nature. But we have the idea that it is they are really the same, or they are really the difference, because we do not see the true nature of consciousness, which is neither same nor different. Suchness cannot be confined to such concepts as sameness and difference. If it is confined to these concept, then it is not suchness. So it means not less than the idea of sameness is based on the idea of differentiation. An idea of differentiation is based on the idea of sameness. Again, this wonderful aspect of dependent origination. So that which is born is not really born. That which ceases is not really ceasing. And this is our true experience. So, in other words, the idea of pure and the idea of impure is all based on suchness, which is the true nature of the mind. This true nature of the mind never changes, but the objects always change. And because we consider these objects that always changing as something real, we don't see that our existence is just a continuity of the moments of arising and passing away at the same time. Therefore, we don't understand our true self, which can never be separate from suchness. And in the suchness, dependent origination, either pure paratantra or the impure paratantra arises, but arises based on our arbitrary concepts. They are called parikalpita, arbitrary concepts based on language, on names, on communication. They bring the idea of real sameness and real differentiation. This parikalpita means fabricated all around. Our words, our sentences, our syllables, we communicate by sentences, by names. The other types of creatures communicate by all kinds of syllables, like birds, like animals. But modern research shows that some animals, they have a very, very intricate, very difficult to understand system of communication based on just simple sounds. Yet they understand each other perfectly. So this sounds, vowels, consonants, and these names and sentences based on names, they give the idea that the relation in terms of difference and sameness really exists in reality. But this is precisely what separates us from the enlightenment. So that much to the explanation of the sameness. As soon as we differentiate in terms of sameness and the differentiation, then what will happen? Then this very well-known 6 aspects of the gross mind happen one by one. So we are very difficult unless we realize the falseness of this strict division in terms of sameness and difference, then very difficult to get detached from the differentiating mind. Then the text says, Shiku Sutta. This is why according to the sutra, I will read my translation so that we don't get stuck. Therefore, sutra based on this meaning, Shiku Sutolo Zhong Yi Yu Zi Yi Shuo Yi Qie Zhong Sheng Ben Lai That is, therefore, the sutra based on this meaning explain that all beings, since ever, since always, since time without beginning, they, uh, having entered, literally, having entered nirvana from the very beginning, from the time without beginning, all beings without exception, the good beings, the bad beings, we are all, we have already entered nirvana. That is our natural state of the mind, which is suchness. So bodhi, bodhi, he does not translate. Usually he says kye, here he does not translate. He just says bodhi. So the Bodhidharma, doslova bodhidharma, the Bodhidharma, the phenomenon of body, therefore cannot be cultivated because it is our natural state. It has to be understood. It has to be experienced by awareness. But this awareness deepens step by step. Nevertheless, it is what is to be understood. So just like the Heart Sutra says, Wusuo Teku Bodhi Sato Yi Pore Polo Mitoku the Anutolo Samyak Sambodhi, the Bodhisattva based on non-attaining attains the highest. So the non-attaining is the highest dharma, but the non-attaining is not something in contrast to attaining. Yes, we attain, but in terms of non-attaining, this is what is to be understood. Because ultimately, in suchness, there is nothing to hold. So this bodhidharma, this phenomenon of the body, cannot be produced. It is asamskrita, it is non-produced, so it cannot have the aspect literally of production. As ultimately it cannot be attained. This is very instructive for this is the Vimalakirti Nirdesha Sutra, the great layman sage Vimalakirti precisely says that the body cannot be attained because we beings from the very beginning, we are there. And this body, Yi Wu Si Xiang Ke Jian, this body also has no any outer form, any physical form, any form aspect that can be seen. So body and not body, both they are, as we have learned, based on suchness. So as Vimalakirti says, I have got the quotations here. Because nirvana is real, it cannot be attained, and there is no one who can attain it. So the real suchness has no form that can be seen. Here, paradox. So it has no. It is Chinese is very fond of double negative. The the uh, the wisdom forms are non-emptiness, literally, because wisdom forms cannot be perceived. So one can ask, does not the Buddha have the 32 characteristics of the Superman and 80 secondary characteristics of the Superman? He will explain later. This is what our defiled consciousness sees. The real Buddha, the real Nirvana is omnipresent. And what is omnipresent cannot be perceived in terms of the forms. So the forms of the omnipresence of the great wisdom, or let us say the transcendental wisdoms, they cannot be seen because the essence of the Dharma cannot be seen by any uh, any physical eye. It can be seen by the Dharma eye, by the wisdom eye, not by any eye which sees the forms. So the Buddha forms in this tradition, we will come to it later. It's all connected with the later part of the text. That's why we have to read very carefully. The In other words, as we have explained, the forms that are non-emptiness, in other words, the emptiness forms, uh, which have the character of non-emptiness, which are empty, they can only be seen by the wisdom, by the omniscient wisdom, which does not see anything as being real. And this omniscient wisdom is what is to be realized. So this omniscient wisdom is also can be connected with this aspect of the original the body, 本觉. The 本觉 sees in this tradition, that is why awakening of faith in Mahayana, the 本觉 sees the true reality. Therefore, because we see the true reality, we see that our differentiation is based on our illusionary karmic consciousness. So we can go deeper and deeper into the process of enlightening, which is called Shritye, which is going back to the origin. And the origin is the suchness. We have learned that everything arises from suchness. It can never leave suchness. The object changes, but the true nature of the mind, which in this tradition is suchness, cannot change. So the suchness is the tea, is the essence, and the objects, they are the yuan, or they are the beginning we had, they are the meaning. When we have don't have objects, we cannot have any meaning, but they are meaning still in the terms of the suchness. The meaning cannot leave the root, which is the suchness. So the body, we cannot understand body in terms of the cultivation. When we cultivate something, we want to attain something, but what we want to attain is non-attainment. Because of non-attaining, we attain the highest, which is the non-dualistic nirvana, which is the supreme nirvana, which is a nirvana not related to any differentiation. Now we come to the last part. Today we only can cover that much, and that is the aspect of differentiation. And it says, Yi Xiang Zhi, this aspect of differentiation can be compared to all kinds of pottery. Each and every piece of pottery is different. We have plates, we have jars, we have cups, we have all kinds of different, everything is made from the same, what we have learned in the beginning, these subtle atoms of clay. And in the same way, these anashrava dharmas, that means the pure paratantra, the pure relativity, based on these 11 positive or wholesome aspect of the mind, and ignorance, which is the root of all the unwholesome states of mind. They are all different based on this same illusionary karmic consciousness, which sees the differentiation as something real. Differentiation cannot be real. Sameness also cannot be real. Now, the Pritakjana, the ordinary man, he sees these aspects of sameness and differentiation through the aspect of mind connected with clinging, then he clings to this concept that he has and which form his word. And he believes, because he believes very stubbornly, all these concepts, they are real, they correspond to the reality. So this is the world of the common man. Now, when we become enlightened in the tradition of the disciples or in the tradition of the Buddhas for themselves, then, according to this tradition, we are, so to say, bound to the differentiation between ignorance and the anashrava, ignorance between the uh, pure dharmas and the impure dharmas. Hmm? The Shravakas, they are attached to this difference. Therefore, as we have learned, they believe in individual realization, individual body. So they do not see that this real body is suchness, and the nature of suchness is that it never changes. Only it changes seemingly because of different objects. And these different objects, they are manifestations already, as we have learned, of the ignorance. And ignorance give rise, we have learned, to all the impure dharmas, to all the impure aspects of our perception and of our feelings. Hmm? And we differentiate the world in accordance to our perceptions and to our feelings. So we get involved more and more in these in the worldly reality based on sameness and differentiation, and we do not see that it is all one moment of the moving mind, which is a karmic mind. Whether we like it or not, it is a karmic mind. But we do not see it according to this tradition. Only Buddha sees it because he has fully realized in this tradition the mind only. So, because he has fully realized mind only, he sees that all these objects that appear in the mind, they are illusionary mind, not a real mind. So he knows that the real mind, you cannot cling to the real mind. It is impossible. But you can approach it by purifying the mind, by cultivating these 11, in this tradition, 11 aspects of the mental factors which make the mind pure and which counter the defiled states of mind, which are all based on ignorance. But as soon as we differentiate, ignorance is already there because the mind moves. But this we don't see. But we can, so to say, get the inkling of it by practicing the samadhi, which this text recommends, the samadhi without object. So, in order to cultivate the samadhi without object, we let the objects arise in the mind, but we observe them as being a product of ignorance. So ultimately, this, according to this tradition, is a fast way to purify the mind. And then we Nian Wu Nian. We are thinking about no thinking. We cannot think about non-thinking because non-thinking is also thinking. But nevertheless, through non-thinking, we get the idea that thinking is already product of the moving mind, which is the karmic mind. When there is karmic mind, there is perceiver. When there is perceiver, there is a perceived. When there is a perceived, we start differentiating. And when we start differentiating, we get stuck in the continuity of consciousness. So this division into the seeing in terms of oneness and in terms of the differentiation, then develops our idea how the ignorance gets hold of the mind. This thinking in terms of sameness and differentiation are already in this tradition the defiled states of mind, and all defiled states of mind are based on ignorance, and ignorance is not real. If the ignorance was real, then no one would ever had a chance to experience enlightenment and process of enlightenment. So because ignorance is not real, it's also conditioned, not unconditioned. Even though the Buddha explains the dependent origination starting with ignorance, yet ignorance is not the beginning. Ignorance is also conditioned, and whatever is conditioned cannot be beginning. So now we have exhausted the time, and we have learned, I hope, a lot, so that we can investigate. The next paragraph explains what are the causes and conditions of our experience in the world, the experience of samsara. Samsara, in this tradition, in Chinese, is called Shen Mie, which means arising and cessation. And arising and cessation is also this word for samsara, and is a word also for the as soon as a mind arises, it has the arising and cessation. And arising and cessation is the continuity of the mind. And unless we penetrate this, the arising and cessation belongs to the continuity of the mind, which keeps us in the bondage, then we cannot have the supreme realization, the non-dualistic realization. So now exactly it is 4 o'clock, so we don't start the next paragraph. Let us just transfer merit for the benefit of all sentient beings, and that will be for today. So see you after 2 weeks, next week, because of my journey to Norway. I won't be able to teach. I will be on the way back to my place, so I cannot teach in the car. So let us continue in 2 weeks. 2 weeks again, the same time, Sunday. If there is any change, I will inform in proper time, at least 1 week before, so that there will be announcement and we can adjust. Okay, let us transfer the merit, very important practice for the essence practice for non-dualistic understanding of the process of enlightenment. I make the simple version. Some other time we can learn the more developed versions, but the simple versions is the most basic. 愿你自古的不计一切，我等一众生，皆苦成佛道。May the merit of today's practice spread to all beings so that we attain the state of perfection, the non-dualistic realization. Om